Your guide to the 7 deadly sins and the virtues that crush them. Is this a part of the Marvel universe? Hello everyone in YouTube world, my name is Scarlett and I am an atheist and skeptic, and today I thought we would look at a Catholic take on the 7 deadly sins. This particular vlog is on Good Catholic, which is, as it says, brought to you by the Catholic Company. That caught my interest, and so I thought I would look at the About Us, and here's what I found. Hello, we are the Catholic Company. We are a leading online and catalog retailer of high-quality Catholic books and gifts, and have been in business for more than 20 years, answering Pope St. John Paul II's call for all Catholics to join in a new evangelization. Pope St. John Paul II. That is a mouthful. And yeah, nothing says evangelization by selling a bunch of stuff on the internet. Speaking of which, if you're interested in buying some good Catholic merch, look at this. You can buy this badass St. Michael bronze finished statue, 14 inches, for a mere $145.95. Doesn't St. Michael look awfully buff, like a Greek warrior, like an Achilles with wings? I mean, that is pretty awesome. And I'm assuming that's Lucifer, that he has his sandal on. I think it's a sandal. Yeah, really awesome. So St. Michael is going to join us on this little visit to the Catholic website, Good Catholic. And let's look at who our author du jour is. This person's name is Rachel Schrader. And this post first appeared on May 26th of 2021 and was updated pretty much a year later, in May 16th, 2022, around the same time too. Maybe that's just when Rachel publishes. Let's see who this is. Rachel Schrader is a British-American writer, artist, and musician living in the Carolinas. Wow, a British Catholic. That's interesting. You don't see many of those. She is the managing editor of Good Catholic and its sister brand, Get Fed. That's going to work really well with gluttony. A devotee of the traditional Latin Mass and the ancient liturgical traditions of the Church, Rachel spent 3 years working for the priestly fraternity of St. Peter, where she was the founding editor of the FSSP news site, The Missive. Aren't all Catholics like fans of the traditional Latin Mass? I went to a traditional Latin funeral a few years back, and it was incredible, an incredible experience. Crazy, just really, but incredible. Anyway, let's move on. She particularly enjoys writing on military topics and the concepts of courage, self-sacrifice, fortitude, and what it means to love as God loves. Wonder what that does mean, to love as God loves. And military topics, that's an interesting intersection here. She is an avid runner, nature lover, and student of wilderness medicine and survivalism. Wow, this is giving me prepper vibes for some reason. Anyway, one thing I do have to say that I approve of is Rachel has more interest than just the church, like artist, musician, nature lover, all kinds of stuff. You know, I think that's good. You know, a little balance in her life. Let's go see what Rachel has to tell us about the deadly sins. We start off, Catholic or not, most people have heard of the 7 deadly sins. All right, okay, yeah, well, you know, it's a blog, so we're not getting really deep yet. But what are these 7 sins and why are they deadly? What can we do to make ourselves more aware of them and counteract them? A brief introduction to these sins and their opposing virtues will get us started. Our good friend St. Thomas Aquinas will help us out along the way. I just love this image of like the spirit of St. Thomas Aquinas or his ghost or something accompanying us, like we're Dante about to enter hell and we have our Virgil there to guide us through and make sure we get out on the other side. Make sure we come down on the right side of hell. Yeah, let's move on. Let's see what else the introduction brings. One brief point must be made to properly understand the deadly sins. They are not the 7 worst sins per se. They are rather the 7 human vices from which all individual sins spring. As St. Thomas says, the capital vices are those which give rise to others, especially by way of final cause. Okay, so this is how St. Thomas is accompanying us. And yeah, every sentence is like its own paragraph on this, but you know, this is a little less batshit than a lot of the stuff that we've read on this channel. So, you know, this isn't too bad. You know, nice gentle intro into the sins. We're still in the intro though. We got a little bit more to go. To put it in practical terms, if you went to confession and told the priest that you'd committed the sin of anger, that probably wouldn't be enough information for him. That's because you gave him a category rather than a specific act. The priest requires a certain amount of specificity to understand the nature and gravity of the sin so that he can give you absolution and a penance. That's why he'll probably ask what you specifically did. Yeah, so we're in Catholic land here, so we have to go specifically to the priest. We don't just talk to Jesus. We have to go give penance, admit that we committed a sin. So let's go on. Maybe you yelled at your brother for taking the last cookie. That sort of fraternal abuse would, yes, be the result of anger. It's a sin, but not as serious as other sins of anger. Having assessed the gravity of this sin of anger, the priest can now offer a suitable penance and give absolution. Makes sense? Okay, let's dive in. I don't think this makes sense at all. I don't think that yelling at your brother for taking the last cookie is necessarily a sin. If you're expressing anger, what's wrong with that? If your brother does something wrong, if somebody does something wrong and you express your anger and you yell, is that wrong? Is that a sin? This just doesn't seem to rise to the level of sin or something to worry about. If you got mad at your brother for no reason, just no reason at all, you might have to work on your anger issues, but this is the thing with the sins. It's minuscule little things that you do, you have to feel guilt over and go confess to the priest. And I think that that's ridiculous. And so to me, this is why the 7 deadly sins actually don't make a good guide to thinking through what is right action and what is wrong action. Instead of thinking, oh, being angry is just bad, we should think, okay, I got angry. Was that the best way to deal with this? Is there some other way to deal with it? That's more useful. But to say this is a sin, I think that's a little ridiculous. And so, sorry, Rachel, this doesn't make much sense to me. But we're plowing on. Going on. This is at least less batshit than looking at something like Ray Comfort, and it's better written too. Let's see, we're going to start with the sin of pride. And Rachel tells us it's the first sin. And by the way, one thing I do like about this particular blog is it has really great illustrations, although they don't necessarily have anything to do with the sins. She chose them just because they form the letter of whatever the sin is. So this little snake in a tree is just the letter P. Let's go on and see what she says about pride. All right, so we have pride as the act of placing oneself on a higher pedestal than one deserves, and in its worst form, on a higher pedestal than God. Pride was the first sin ever committed. It entered the universe when a certain high-ranking angel named Lucifer decided that being second to God just wasn't enough and declared, non serviam, I will not serve. It changed the course of history forever. Lucifer's name means light bearer, and he was the greatest creature God ever created. Second in glory only to him. Yet he threw it all away. Unbelievable, isn't it? Pride has that power. I don't know, maybe Lucifer was onto something. Maybe Lucifer recognized that God wasn't as great as all that. But let's finish up this particular section. Pride was the first human sin too, at the prompting of an envious Satan. Different sin, see below, who hated humans and how God loved them. Adam and Eve attempted to elevate themselves to the status of gods and brought pride and every other human sin into the world. So I find it interesting that Christians just take as given this story about Lucifer in the Bible. But when I look up where it comes from, which is Isaiah and Ezekiel, those passages are said to be about the kings of Babylon and Tyre, and it's not about angels at all. It's very lofty language. These are prophetic books where these prophets were said to have had a vision, and they're supposed to be about very earthly kings here, not about some battle in the heavens. But I think this is a really great way for Christians to get around the monotheism. Here you have God, you have a bunch of angels, God is a trinity, then you have Lucifer, who was kicked out of heaven, and Satan, who's an incarnation of Lucifer. It's just all very interesting. But it's a nice story for how pride entered the universe. And that Adam and Eve story, was that about pride? When they were tricked by the serpent, which is not necessarily Satan. I mean, the story just says it was a serpent. Later interpretations have said that certain serpent was Satan, but that's not necessarily the case. And was that about pride? What the serpent said was that they were not going to die and they would have knowledge. And it says that Eve was interested in having that knowledge. But was that pride? It just seems like the story is so bare, you can't really assume that. But then I guess that the point of this whole passage is, don't be like Satan, y'all. Don't be like Adam and Eve and get kicked out of the garden. It's just that simple. In terms of guiding us, I just don't see a lot of guiding here. She does go on to talk about humility. We're not going to read all of the virtues because it's not all that interesting. I'm just finding that these are very bare bones. This isn't much information, and it's not very useful, I think, to my behavior on earth today about the problem with pride, just to say, hey, don't be like Satan and don't be like Adam and Eve. Let's move on to the next sin. Envy. The grass is always greener. And again, I just love these drawings. They are maybe the best thing about this webpage, really. Let's see what we have for envy. Surprisingly, envy is not the same as jealousy. Is that surprising? I think it's pretty clear that there are two words, so they're going to have an overlap in meaning, but they're not going to be the same. Dr. Kevin Vost, whoever that is, explains that while jealousy regards our sadness at the prospect of losing some good of our own, envy regards our sadness in reaction to someone else's good. The 7 deadly sins. So I guess Dr. Kevin Vost wrote that. Envy is a disordered sorrow over something that someone else has and a wish to detract from it. As mentioned above, Lucifer hated that Adam and Eve had the happiness that he had thrown away and wanted to take it from them and make them sharers in his misery. He also hated God and wanted to ruin his work. Again, no biblical citations here. Is that really what was going on? It seems like we are actually imposing that on the story because it doesn't say anything about that at all. The serpent does not demonstrate that he hates the happiness that Adam and Eve have, or he wanted to ruin God's work, or anything like that. I also just think these descriptions of envy and jealousy are just kind of blah. So jealousy, I think of as something when you think somebody might take something that you have. Like this Merriam-Webster's dictionary thesaurus says, jealous means fearing someone will take what you have, and envious means desiring what somebody has. Or as it says at the end, jealous can be possessively suspicious. I think these are more apt descriptions of what's going on. Let's finish out what we have for envy. For us, envy usually takes subtler forms. Perhaps someone we know receives some honor or success that we desire, and instead of fostering thoughts of happiness for them, we indulge the desire that they will lose it or be dishonored somehow. Worse, we could take some concrete action to take it from them or ruin it. This is where this ends, and I still feel like I'm not very enlightened, and I don't feel like I have really good understanding of what the issue is or what's going on. Again, Rachel's going to take us into the virtues. I'm not interested in exploring the virtues, but I still feel like you have a feeling of envy. Instead of exploring that, it's just, oh, this is a sin. Don't be like Satan, y'all. Satan was like this, you know. This isn't helpful. This doesn't guide anything. This doesn't help me understand what's going on. It's just like, this is bad, y'all. Don't do it. Let's move on. Avarice, more. Avarice is the desire for more than we need, particularly in regard to material goods. Avarice is a road to nowhere because it is a driving impulse to gather stuff, but no matter how much we have, it never satisfies. Avarice gets particularly ugly when it involves harming the well-being of others. For example, say an employer wants to make his business more profitable and he decides to cut his employees' wages to an unfair level. That's avarice, pure and simple, with some uncharity and injustice to boot. Uncharity. I've heard uncharitable, but uncharity is a new one for me. Hey, but I like it. I like that there is a religious person saying that employers can be greedy. That is really great. So good on Rachel. I really approve of that. But most of this, once again, I don't feel like it's very helpful in understanding why this is a sin. I guess it's just, it can lead to things that are bad. But why this is necessarily something that we should be plaguing ourselves with, this is less helpful. To me, this isn't as good as going to a psychologist and exploring why you have the feelings you do. Wrath, you name it, we've probably been angry with it. I love this illumination. Once again, the best thing about this webpage probably is the drawings that she chose, even though I don't know what these two birds like looking at each other. One has a berry. It seems like that would have been better with envy, but I get it. This is a W. It's two birds that make a W, so they're going to illustrate wrath. All right, and she writes, this one is a perennial. Is a perennial. Okay. Unjust anger afflicts most of us to varying degrees on a regular basis, and its evil fruits can range in severity from an irritated eye roll to mass murder. Oh my God. An irritated eye roll. So we're going to say that that is sinful, that you have an irritated eye roll. Note that I just said unjust. So if I have an irritated eye roll in an unjust anger-filled moment, then that's bad. I just don't understand the beating line. This one is a perennial. Aren't they all? Aren't they all? All the sins are perennial. All right, let's move on. We're back with St. Thomas. He's rejoined us. In his discussion on wrath, says that it is a passion, not a sin, and its sinfulness. Wait, it's a passion, not a sin, and its sinfulness. Okay, I already see a problem with this. It's a passion, not a sin, but it has some sinfulness nonetheless. Okay. All right, let me start over. It is a passion, not a sin, and its sinfulness depends on whether the object of our anger and the mode or amount of anger are according to right reason. If we get angry with someone or something we shouldn't, or if we indulge the anger to an immoderate degree, or it impels us to wrong action, or both, we have a sin. So it's not a sin, but it is a sin, is what I'm reading. Let's take a few different examples of anger and see if we can parse them out. Yes, please, Rachel, help us out with this. Let's say you get angry over the sin of abortion and decide to spend your Saturdays praying outside an abortion clinic. You are perfectly charitable to all persons going in and out and avoid abusive thoughts or words toward those who commit or perpetuate the sin. This holy decision to pray outside the clinic is the result of good anger. Now let's say you get angry at your mom for asking you to pick up your room and speak rudely to her. That's bad anger. Okay, so I get angry because people are getting abortions, and this is just a given that it's a sin. So I'm going to waste my time outside an abortion clinic. And sure, you can say that the people praying outside are being quote unquote perfectly charitable with no angry thoughts or beef. But I guess I'm just confused why it's necessary to pray outside the clinic where you're going to be seen and you could potentially intimidate the people going in. Why can't you pray in your church or your home or your wherever? Why does this have to be at the clinic? And I'm sorry, I guess I just don't buy the fact that these people won't have abusive thoughts or words, or they're not going to hold awful signs or something like that. As it is, these people already think that what's going on in the abortion clinic is a sin. So if nothing else, there's what I consider this abusive thought, which is, here are sinners acting. So basically, I find that this is wrong to say, this is good anger put to good use, whereas here's a teenager who probably doesn't know how to regulate their emotions, who gets upset in a moment and yells at their mother. Why would that even be a sin? Is it something to address? Sure, you should have a chat with the teenager and explain to them how better to regulate their emotion, how better to deal with these situations, and hopefully you're also demonstrating how to better deal with conflict and things of that nature. But to call this a sin and say that this is bad anger, and that presumably because these are Catholics, you're going to have to go confess this to a priest who will tell you to say a few Hail Marys or something. I find it a little ridiculous that this rises to the level of bad anger. And earlier on, we were told that anger could lead to things like murder, but here we are. The things that we've chosen to address are, it's okay to use your anger to pray outside of a clinic for some reason. Like, go pray in your own home. And it's not okay to get angry with a family member in a moment of pique. I don't know. This video is getting to be a little bit long, so I think we're going to leave it here with it's okay to express your anger by praying at an abortion clinic, but it's not okay to yell at a family member. And we're not even going to deal with things that I would consider really bad, like murder or harming somebody with anger. I don't know what you think. I find that so far these have been fairly superficial and kind of like, it's just bad because it is. And it's not really helpful guidance for why they're bad or what to do about these kinds of things. But what did you think? What struck you? Put it in the comments below. And while you're there, you can like and subscribe and do all that YouTube stuff. You know what to do. You're on YouTube. And if you like what I do, you can buy me a coffee. Link is in the description below. And I will see you in the next one. Maybe not part 2 yet. Maybe something else. Not sure what I'm planning on. But I'll see you there. Take care.